Honorable Government Spokesperson, Honorable Chief Ombudsman, One UN Resident Coordinator, Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished leaders from government, development partners, private sector, civil society organizations, and religious sector, dear participants, good morning. My name is Edward Kalisa. I work for RGB as the Secretary General, and I'm privileged to be your MC for this event. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for responding to our invitation to attend this event. Welcome to the launch of Rwanda Governance Scorecard. Dear CEO, distinguished participants, we are here to witness the launch of Rwanda Governance Scorecard for the 8th time. As most of you know, as a country, we have chosen to hold ourselves accountable in our national journey for transformation. And RGS, or Rwanda Governance Scorecard, is one of the tools we use to do that. Rwanda Governance Scorecard assesses the state of governance in Rwanda based on a number of pillars, indicators, and variables. I don't want to go into the details because in the next couple of minutes, we will follow the presentation that will detail the content of the scorecard. So I will briefly go through the agenda for today. Our next item will be welcome remarks that will be delivered by Dr. Nibishaka Emmanuel, the Deputy CEO of Rwanda Governance Board. And we'll have a presentation of the 8th edition of Rwanda Governance Scorecard that will be presented by Dr. Yusta Kaitesi, the CEO of Rwanda Governance Board. Thereafter, we will have the remarks from the One UN Resident Coordinator, and his remarks will be followed by an interactive session where everyone will have an opportunity to share their thoughts about the presentation. And that will be followed by a group photo. Then we'll end our session with lunch. Dear CEO, distinguished members here present, I would like to invite Dr. Nibishaka Emmanuel to deliver his welcome remarks. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For those who knows me very well, I tend to be very shy and timid when facing a very beautiful audience like this. And After careful assessment, my CEO, my boss, tasked me to deliver the opening remarks, perhaps to overcome this challenge of being shy. So she forgot that the COVID-19 pandemic, though it has made our life very difficult, on one hand, it has made it very easier for shy people like me because I have a mask on, so you can't see me properly. So I don't have to worry about anything. So I hope I won't disappoint my CEO. So on her behalf, allow me to welcome you all to this important occasion to officiate the launch of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard in its 8th edition. Out of many meetings, I believe, more than any other RGV event, this one expressed really your commitment and recognition of governance in the socio-economic transformation of our beloved country, Rwanda, and it's a hallmark to all we do in the Rwanda Governance Board. It's about governance and the status of governance in our country. This is why I am particularly, it's particularly gratifying for me to be standing in front of you and welcome you all. We are together with members of the diplomatic corps, heads of government institutions, and other senior officials in the public and the private sector, as well as our partners in faith-based organizations, academia, and media. We value your partnership, inputs, and support, and we thank you for finding time to share this moment to hear the current status of transformational governance in Rwanda. Why this event is so important? I believe I share the same conviction with you all that regular assessment is essential in helping us to identify area of improvement in a timely manner so that we don't lose the momentum in building a better life for all, for our citizens. Hence, I view the scorecard as an essential tool to revitalize accountable governance that Rwanda has chosen because it tells us where we are performing well and where we still have some gaps so that we can devise appropriate measure to fill them. So this is the reason why the scorecard has been consistently building on our national planning and strategic development framework, mainly you will recall the Vision 2020 and the current National Strategy for Transformation, NST1. These priorities are translated into more implementable actions through the sector strategic plan at central level and district development strategies at local level, which are very critical when we do our research and compare this scorecard. That's why we draw 8 pillars, as you can see in the reports in front of you, but also on the banners in the room. Those pillars help us to generate credible and reliable data that serve as an evidence-based source to inform policy, decision-making, and implementation, as well as contribute to the current scientific knowledge about economic, social, and political governance in Rwanda, and most importantly, to track our country's performance in relation to our national, regional, international commitments. However, I need to emphasize that Rwandans are the primary beneficiaries of the RGS because when you conduct this type of research, we are more interested in generating data that tell us the truth that nobody else can tell us. Of course, as a research institution, we collaborate with different organizations. We accept and appreciate feedback given to Rwanda from different international entities that work in the area of governance. And you have consistently collaborated with other think tanks and research institutions in and out of the country in our efforts to make the scorecard to serve better its purpose. That's why in the next presentation and in our previous publication, the RGS used triangulation method that combines local and international data. I remember back in 2010, and I was very young, of course, when the first edition of RGS was published, there were a lot of reservation and skepticism about it. But whatever came out of it, it has been good for our governance, not only in Rwanda, but also beyond our borders across Africa. For instance, several sister countries in Africa and the African Union, particularly the African peer review mechanism, for those who are familiar with the mechanism, have recognized the critical role of the RGS in helping the continent to put in place informed policies that can help us to overcome current governance challenges. Because the finding of RGS have enabled different sectors in Rwanda to improve in their respective areas of intervention, we believe and we are ready to also assist when asked to do so by fellows Africans. For this reason, let me express our appreciation for your institution's contribution to the report, be it the previous edition, but also to this edition. I can confidently say that the resistance and sometimes the skepticism in providing data is now the thing of the past. And most, if not all, the institutions that we approached have provided easy access to hard data and other information for the purpose of this self-assessment exercise. They have understood that RGS is not a name and shame project. It's not about what you did right or wrong, but what we set ourselves as imperatives to be achieved, gauging where we are and how we can speed up the process and the mechanism in achieving those goals. This true sense of ownership is really commendable. I really need to commend all of the institutions that have been contributing and helping this exercise. Let me also express our sincere gratitude to the UNDP for its continued support to RGB and other government institutions in making a better life for all, and especially for us at RGB in producing the scorecard since its inception in 2010. This is really a valuable support, thanks to the UN, UNDP and its UN resident coordinator here present with us. So how do we do the scorecard? Of course, as I was in 2010, I am aware that some people in the room, very few people, might still be struggling to understand the RGS methodology. But what I can tell you is that our methods are very simple to understand. I don't want to simplify, the process that is, otherwise complex to others, but we employ international methods that are easily understandable, applied governance method, in which we borrow some indicators, international indicators, and we customize them to our local context. And in trying to do so, we contextualize those indicators to our national planning and development frameworks, where we develop indicators, variables, and sub-variables, and then we also complement them with local data from citizens and expert perception survey, like the citizen report card. So especially for this edition, we used sectorial targets from 2017 to 2020 from various ministries and institutions. And then We also use the citizen report card 2021. It's yet to be available, but because we have conducted that research already, so we use the data, recent data from the CRC. And then, when it comes to pillars that have no annual target in the sector strategic plan, we use targets from the National Strategy for Transformation, NST1, and other sources such as the National Institute for Statistics of Rwanda. In doing so, we assess current performance vis-a-vis the targets in those sector strategic plan or vis-a-vis the National Strategy for Transformation. And then we weight the score, which the CEO will be presenting soon. In all of this, the role of our stakeholders is very important. And you are more than welcome to come back to us in the case you need more clarity on our findings. We always provide easy access to our data sets when our partner institutions wish to consult with them for better implementation of the recommendations and for the better understanding of our findings. So the current edition we are launching today gives a comprehensive comparative analysis with the previous edition and gives a snapshot of the variation that have occurred in the pillars performance since the first edition. The improvement or decline, and I have to emphasize this, the improvement or decline in pillar performance is not about figures. Rather, it is the reality on the ground as an undeniable fact of the efforts invested by the government response in the COVID-19, the role of the citizens in this response, and the particular efforts invested in protecting the citizens and assisting the vulnerable during the pandemic. So I therefore invite you to follow the CEO's presentation and look forward to your comments and contribution in implementing the recommendation. I thank you very much, and I wish you a fruitful participation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nibishaka, for the remarks, particularly for the steps that we take to generate the data for Rwanda Governance Scorecard. We are now moving to the next item, which is the reason why we are here, actually, the presentation of the findings of Rwanda Governance Scorecard to be delivered by Dr. Yusta Kaitesi. Thank you.
Good morning. The Chief Ombudsman, the government spokesperson, the chairperson of the Rwanda Elders Advisory Forum, one UN resident coordinator, Your Excellencies, ambassadors and representative of the diplomatic corps, the representative of the Rwanda Defense Forces, distinguished heads of public institutions, distinguished representative of the Rwanda National Police, representatives of the faith sector, the Rwanda Interreligious Council, representatives of the Network for International Organizations in Rwanda, representatives of the civil society, representatives of the academia, members of parliament, the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies, distinguished participants, you're very welcome this morning to the launch of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard. It gives me a great pleasure to present to you the findings I think I'll take the option of not being shy and take off my mask, but also considering that I'm going to be speaking a little bit longer, and my colleagues protected me by using their masks earlier. I'll now go to the findings of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard 8th edition, which my colleagues have introduced from the perspective of the Governance Scorecard. I'll ask, okay. Well, I wanted to start with our understanding of governance generally as a country, because it gives us an understanding of why we even do the Rwanda Governance Scorecard. For Rwanda, good governance has an understanding and is understood as accountability, transparency, and efficiency in deploying the scarce resources of this country. Further, good governance also refers to a kind of governance that is centered on citizen participation and inclusiveness. And it also refers to having the rule of law that supports and protects all its citizens without discrimination. It is understood from a perspective of social and economic transformation towards the nation's rapid development. My colleagues earlier talked to you about the Rwanda Governance Scorecard, and I'll just go through it again. The Rwanda Governance Scorecard is a quantifiable index that gauges the state of governance in Rwanda. It assesses the state of governance against national, regional, and global targets. And thanks to the planning structure of this country, it is easier to find all the other commitments that the country has made in the national strategy for transformation, and becomes easier to measure against the targets set in, because they reflect also the nation's regional and international commitments. It's also a method that reflects global governance standards and homegrown approaches in terms of data collection and engagement. Its main objectives include to generate credible and reliable data on governance, evidence-based to inform policy, decision-making, and improvements. That's why at the end of the scorecard, you realize that we also report on the extent of delivering on the policy recommendations therein, and to contribute to current and contextualized knowledge about Rwanda, as earlier mentioned by my colleagues. The way the Rwanda Governance Scorecard is developed has already been discussed by the Deputy CEO of the Rwanda Governance Board, and he clearly mentioned that the sources of the indicators include international indexes, international frameworks, and our homegrown pillars. It also is reflected mostly from different surveys, the primary data that comes from the Citizen Report Card, the Rwanda Civil Society Development Barometer, the Rwanda Media Barometer, the Rwanda Bribery Index, and Service Delivery Monitoring Reports, plus the Rwanda Reconciliation Barometer. We really want to appreciate institutions that produce these sources of data. And other sources of data, as earlier mentioned, are the reports and other administrative documents collected from concerned institutions. So as mentioned by the Deputy CEO, the scoring is measured against the target. So when you look at the governance scorecard that you have before you, you will see three things that are very key in understanding our scoring method. You will see the data, which is the source where we get the data from. You will see the target, and therefore the scoring is the data against the target and the extent to which, of course, which reflects the extent to which we are supposed to be performing at. I'll now introduce the Rwanda Governance Scorecard edition, 8th edition's findings. The Rwanda Governance Scorecard is reflected from 8 pillars: the rule of law, economic development, economic and corporate governance, quality of service delivery, and corruption, transparency and accountability, investing in human and social development, safety and security, participation and inclusion, and political rights and civil liberties. When you look at the scoring of all the pillars, security and safety and security was ranked number 1 at 95.47. The rule of law became second at 87.08%, and corruption, transparency, and accountability, the third at 86.77%, and then for 84.19% for participation and inclusion. The political rights and civil liberties pillar scored 83.80%. Quality of service delivery scored 81.86%. I will later explain. It's the probably the most improved indicator this year. And as the Deputy CEO mentioned, there are things we regret out of COVID, but there are certain things we are going to celebrate because coupling the investment that the country has done and the opportunity of using ICT has actually is the one that we can really base on to mention the major improvement in the quality of service delivery. Investing in human and social development is at 75.23, and economic and corporate governance is at 74.65, being the last indicator this year, with the reasons that we all understand. When we compare the pillars of the RGS 8th edition and the previous pillars, the rule of law improved. The rule of law stands at 87.07, as mentioned earlier. Political rights and civil liberties is at 83.80. Participation and inclusiveness is at 84.19 from 81.96. Safety and security is at 95.47, moving from 95.44. Investing in human and social development moved from 73.32 to 75.23, and corruption, transparency, and accountability moved from 86.28 to 86.76. Quality of service delivery from 78.31 to 81.86. And economic and corporate governance from 78.14 to 74.65. I will now go to each pillar performance. The rule of law, we measure under the rule of law the performance of the judiciary, which stands at 77.96, the performance of the legislature, which stands at 89.79, the performance of the prosecution, which stands at 94.53, and access to justice, which stands at 86.02. In most indicators, we highlight the most improved variables, and as said earlier, the measure stands from the pillars to indicators and variables, and we have chosen to look into different variables where we have remarkable change. Variables improvement, the independence of the parliament is highlighted at 16.2%, and in this particular rule of law pillar, the indicators that need improvement is the performance of the judiciary, in particular to the percentage of backlog cases in the judiciary. You will understand that one of the impacts of COVID-19 was also creating the backlogs in one way or the other, and the percentage of cases processed by the courts against all cases in courts. As earlier said, we are declaring these results conscious of the impact of COVID-19 and the measures there too that sometimes cause delays in some of the performance. On political rights and civil liberties, which scores at 83.80%, democratic rights and freedom is at 83.60%, respect for human rights and core international conventions is at 83.16%, the role of non-state actors remains at 73.3%, which is the least performing at this level, and the performance of political organizations is at 91.28%, access to information is at 83.90%. You realize that the most improved indicator is the role of non-state actors in policy formulation, in particular the media, and taking stock again the importance of the realities of the past year. people saw the media as the source of information and engagement more than other sources. We are speaking of a period where even the citizen assemblies that we used to do in many perspectives did not happen. So we almost all depended on the media for information and for engagement. And we realized that many institutions actually that were supposed to engage the citizens directly were able to engage them through the media. So a great thank you to the media fraternity for availing the space and for the recognition that you have played an important role in access to, in policy formulation over the year. The areas that need improvement under the indicator of political organization is the satisfaction is the citizen satisfaction with political organizations in promoting governance and social cohesion, which stands at 65.10%. On participation and inclusiveness, 84.19% is how the pillar performs. The citizen participation raised very high at 89.06%. Power sharing and inclusiveness, especially at a parliament level, stands at 90.20%. Gender equality in leadership stands at 81.65%. Decentralization at 84.71%. And participation of non-state actors at 75.33%. The most improved indicator in this area was citizen participation, which had an addition of more than 6.5%. And the most improved variable, which also informs the entire indicator improvement, was the citizen participation through volunteerism. And I think we all now know the youth volunteers that we didn't know earlier, and the participation of ordinary citizens in really dealing with the issues that affected us most during the COVID-19 and the process of dealing with the COVID-19. The participation of ordinary citizens was a very key element, which increased according to the citizens, citizen participation at that level, especially through volunteerism. The areas that need improvement is citizen participation in elaboration of district plans, imihigo, and budget, and you realize that the avenues of participation in previous years, which included the citizen assemblies, the umuganda were not in operation as we have always done due to the COVID prevention measures. And participation of non-state actors, which is CSO participation, still remains at 69.29%, despite the engagement and improvement that happened in the period of dealing with COVID-19. On safety and security, 95.47, as I said from the beginning of this scorecard, same as from the beginning of the citizen report card that we haven't launched now, this pillar sustains the leadership at this level, maintaining security at 95.38, reconciliation, social cohesion, and unity, which we think is a key element of our security as a country, at 93.76%, national security at 99.53%, and personal and property safety at 93.19%. So I would like to go to the pillar on investing in human and social development, which is 75.23%. This includes the social elements of us as a community. Education is at 76.17%. I should mention that most of the data used in the education sector was sustained as the most recent data from the previous RGS, because except the element of access, which is a result of many constructions of schools, but many other elements did not really operate as a result of COVID-19 measures, and therefore most of the data that we sustained at this level were the data that comes also from the previous RGS. The health sector improved highly at 91.33%. Climate change and environmental resilience remains at 71.53%, and social protection remains at 61.88%. In this particular pillar, we recognize that the most improved indicator is the one for health, which recorded 6.34%, and the variable on maternal and child health recorded the most improvement at 17.41%. The environment, of course, the health environment has had its own challenges, but there is recognition of the areas that have seen great improvement. The areas that need improvement remain the social protection, in particular the social protection for people with disabilities. And the main issue at that is categorization of people with disabilities, which allows them access to many other rights and enjoyments from that regard. The climate and environment resilience remains a challenge at climate change resilience at 40.28%. And the education in terms of reducing dropout rates at 45.5%, and then satisfaction with the school feeding program, which still remains at 50.80%. Of course, I keep the caveat that some of this data reflects the previous time, because by the time we were data collecting, some of the COVID measures had made the schools to stay closed at the time. The anti-corruption, transparency and accountability pillar recorded on instances of corruption. So that is not the people, looking at the people who report instances of corruption, 88.10% reflect that they have not had instances of corruption. On anti-corruption measures, we stand at 77.35%. And on accountability, we remain at 85.7%. And on transparency, we stand at 95.91%. I should mention that the transparency indicator improved the most, and it includes, of course, elements of e-recruitment as a means of transparent, e-procurement as a means of transparency, and of course, asset declaration for the leaders in this country as a means of transparency as well. And that recorded the most of improvement. The areas that need improvement include accountability, especially in relation to entities obtaining unqualified audit opinions. And I should mention from a governance perspective that greater emphasis should happen on compliance with the rules and regulations in dealing with public finances. On quality of service delivery, as I mentioned earlier, we qualify it into 5 major indicators: service delivery in transformational governance, which is at 87.15%. This includes security, this includes the trust in the leadership, this includes all the interventions in the area of transformational governance. Service delivery in social transformation is at 82.31%. Service delivery monitoring, which is a different report, is at 73.24%, and service delivery in economic transformation is at 77.48%. Of particular interest is service delivery through ICT, which is an area that we have expanded in measuring through the citizen report card. It stood at 89.11%, leading the indicators in this particular pillar. And of course, the realities, as I mentioned earlier, of last year led us to enjoy the investment of ICT that this country has done through many of us do not have any cash anymore, because the platforms for payment have increased. A lot of public services have gone online, and there is clear indication that service delivery through ICT has made a great difference in accessing services in the country. The most improved indicators in this area include service delivery in social transformation, which had an addition of 5.41%, and service delivery through ICT, which also increased at 5.07%. The variables that increased the most was quality of service delivery in private sector, but remember that the importance of ICT through this process was also very key. The areas that need improvement include the indicator on service delivery in economic transformation, in particular, the percentage of citizen satisfaction with service delivery in agriculture sector. And in this area, the particular interest is post-harvest management. And then the percentage of citizen satisfaction with service delivery in land sector specifically as well. The economic and corporate governance pillar stands at 74.65%, and as I mentioned earlier, it stands at the last position. The macroeconomic indicators are at 71.58%. Foreign trade and industrialization is at 66.61%. Corporate governance is at 73.79%, and business environment promotion is at 86.60%. The most improved variable is saving rates as a percentage of the GDP, which increased at 18.57%. Congratulations to the efforts to educate the population on saving. The areas that need improvement include macroeconomic indicators, economic growth, GDP per capita, reducing percentage of people living below the poverty line, and then the creation of off-farm jobs that also still remain an area of concern. The foreign trade and industrialization area also needs improvement, especially in export as a percentage of imports, and export growth as required. Corporate governance also, that is governance in the private sector, needs a great improvement in the areas of gender equality in private sector leadership particularly. And in this area, we look at the leadership of the private sector generally, but also the leadership of the forums of the private sector from the national level to the district level that reflects certain gaps that still stand out. Of course, it's at 68%, but it still needs improvement as to the extent of the required gender equality. Now, I would like to move to the trends, to the trend performance of the RGS since its inception. My colleague, the Deputy CEO of RGB earlier mentioned that since the inception of the RGS, we track the trends of performance. And on the economic and corporate governance, on the pillar on safety and security, the trends were from the first edition to the current edition. It has progressively and continued to improve and remains at a good pace of leading this pillar. The pillar on participation and inclusion at the start was at 74.23% and has continued to increase and stands at 84.19% with great improvement from the initial edition. The pillar on political rights and civil liberties has also sustained growth from 71.42% on to 83.80% in the current edition. And the pillar on the rule of law started off at a very low pace at 67.10% back in 2010 and now stands at 87.02%. The pillar on economic and corporate governance was first assessed in the second edition and was at 72.93% and has had its own fluctuations over the years, but now stands at 74.65% for the reasons that were earlier mentioned, including the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. The pillar on quality of service delivery has actually often sustained the last place for a very long time. It started off at 66.21%, and its growth hasn't been very progressive, you will all notice. As I mentioned earlier, the greater growth it has had was over the last year for this RGS 2021, and the reason behind it, thanks to the government policy of trying to put most services online, was the use of ICT in service delivery and the impact of the private sector, especially during the lockdowns where the private sector sustained our livelihoods in different ways. The pillar on corruption, transparency, and accountability has also tremendously grown over the years. Started off with 76.22% and now stands at 86.77%, indicating the differences that have happened over the years. and the pillar of investing in human and social development has had its own fluctuations over the years and stands at 75.23%. It's one of the pillars that really require a great sense of improvement in order for us as a country to achieve the knowledge-based economy that we are pursuing as a country. I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to present the RGS 2021 8th edition findings. And again, I want to thank our partners in the process. I want to thank government institutions and other institutions that provided the data. As I move to the recommendations, we reflect our recommendations on the things that need improvement, but also on the bigger projects that have happened. This RGS and the RGS since 2017 had two categories of recommendations. The first category were multi-year recommendations that reflect the commitments in the NST1 with bigger targets over the years. And the other, every year we introduce new recommendations that are very specific to that RGS. So ongoing policy recommendations include the design and operationalization of a multi-year national-wide strategy for maintaining climate change resilience into development planning. And the process has happened. Every year we take stock of the extent of the inputs in this particular process, but it will remain until 2024 when we see the completion of the intended results in this area. Another ongoing policy recommendation is related to ensuring quality of education to support the attainment of a knowledge-based economy that Rwanda is pursuing. We also have a recommendation on spearheading citizens' ICT literacy in order to leverage ICT investments to service delivery as per the NST1. Remember that the NST1 has as a target of service delivery in public institutions being at ICT, through the ICT at 100%, and that will require growth in the literacy rate of the ordinary citizens in order to fully enjoy the investments that the country has put in. Another ongoing policy recommendation includes to enhance human security and sustain transparency and accountability for socio-economic transformation. We also have included in these ongoing recommendations to strengthen partnership in promoting a culture of service delivery. And I would really want to call upon each of you in this room to remember that service delivery is a duty that we all have to do, because the extent of how we serve is very key in achieving the kind of development that this country is committed to. We have a few new policy recommendations, and one of them is enhancing efficiency and effectiveness in the management of social protection programs for persons with disabilities. I want to really appreciate our partners that are very keen on this, and it's a direction that will only reflect the extent of inclusiveness if highlighted in the things we do and how we do them. We also have included in new policy recommendations to revitalize economic growth and export promotion in order to achieve the NST1 targets. I want to end by thanking you all, the government of Rwanda, for providing with us the budget to fulfill its mandate, UN through the UNDP for providing financial support, and other partners and institutions for providing the required data. We appreciate the role of reviewers for every Rwanda Governance Scorecard. We request different reviewers to make comments. And of course, for each of you for making this day and for giving us the time to present. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusta Kaitesi, for the presentation. I think we now have some details of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard 8th edition. But in addition to that, each of us has a copy of the report, which will provide more details. As you've heard from our Deputy CEO, 1 UN through UNDP has been part of this journey of producing RGS since its inception. I believe there are reasons why they have decided to be part of this journey, and I don't want to explain this on their behalf. I would like to request one UN resident coordinator to make his remarks. Thank you.
Murakoze cyane. Nyakubahwa Chief Ombudsman, Nyakubahwa Government Spokesperson, Nyakubahwa CEO RGS, Nyakubahwa Chair of the Rwanda Elders Advisory Forum, Nyakubahwa Representative of the government, official security, senators, parliamentarians, Nyakubahwa Representative of the civil society organization, Ningo, Media, PSF, and of course, Nyakubahwa ambassadors and representative of the diplomatic corps, head of public institution, dear UN colleague family, Maramutse. First of all, let me challenge my dear friend Emmanuel, because he says he's shy. I want to challenge him for two reasons. One is his first name is Emmanuel, which in Hebraic means God is with us. And it applies to the Messiah. His last name is, there was some typo in the document, but his last name is Nibishaka, which means in Kinyarwanda, if God wills. So you cannot have two names of God and being shy when you are speaking to human beings. So let me say at the onset that I would like really to thank you all for your presence here today to launch the 8th edition of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard, and to congratulate the government of Rwanda and Rwanda Governance Board in particular for the production and launch of this edition, and particularly for keeping the regularity of production despite the challenging COVID-19 context. I would also like to express my deepest gratitude to RGB for inviting and associating the UN in general and UNDP playing a bigger role in particular to this important flagship tool, which since 2010 has become a master document on the state of governance in Rwanda. Likewise, I commend all stakeholders who contributed through data production and inputs to this important governance tool for Rwanda and indeed also for Africa and the world. Rwanda should be highly commended. I had the opportunity to visit almost all African countries. I think this is the single most comprehensive national tool on governance I have ever seen. Not only because of the way that it is produced, not only because of the pillars captured, but I always read it with great interest because of the granularity of the data, which can really trigger policy changes and debate. Because if you say that you have 95%, but you don't know what is underneath, maybe some areas have 100, others 50. The granularity is, in my humble view, the most important factor of your report, because it could trigger really focused recommendation that could trigger how you implement in an accountable manner. So thank you, RGB, and thank you, Rwanda. It is also very impressive to see how different sectors and institutions have, in their unique way, contributed through their own reports, research, and assessments that form the basis of analyzing the trends of governance in Rwanda and devising important recommendations. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, by including citizen perception, the voice of the people, the RGS does not only consider expert perception and analysis of governance trends, but also it keeps people at the center of the assessment. The RGS report, therefore, represents the expression of the views of a variety of actors, experts, and citizens on the governance status. The document also highlights areas that require attention and conveying the sense of urgency of action for a better Rwanda for all. Allow me to note that while we are launching the RGS as a national assessment tool, its impact transcends the national level to play an important role in the context of renewed multilateralism and the UN Decade of Action to speed up the implementation of the shared commitment for sustainable development. In a more difficult context of recovering from COVID-19. Indeed, as we speak, an assessment of the status of domestication of Sustainable Development Goal 16 on to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels is being prepared in Rwanda in collaboration with RGB. To better inform national planning and development processes and to identify areas that need a boost for the country to achieve the Agenda 2030. And the just concluded Universal Periodic Review has also assessed a variety of rights, and the recommendation, the 160 accepted, require governance action. Before concluding, let me highlight some points from the report. I wish to commend the government, and particularly RGB, for the sustained accountability, transparency, and consistency in producing this data, including the citizens' voice, as I mentioned earlier, since 2010. The data and the long-term perspective of improved evidence-based planning at national level has supported all the EDPRS and the NST1 2017-2024. And the RG is also very consistent with many global indicators on governance concerning Rwanda. Number two, of course, it is always important to make improvement. However, it is good to note that all the sectors have shown some progress, thanks to the work that you all have done. Let me also say that since the inception, as it was said by the CEO, the pillar safety and security remains the best performer. These consistent, outstanding results certainly contribute to sustaining an enabling environment for other sectors to better inform and deliver for the development of the country. Number three, the pillar on quality services, it was mentioned, is the best improver of all pillars, and passing from yellow category for the first time of all past RGS edition to green category under the current edition, scoring more than 80%, even though it remains at 6th place. This shows that we are improving in this area, and we would make sure to enhance improvement by focusing on indicators left behind: service delivery in economic transformation and service delivery monitoring. Quality service delivery entails satisfying the expectations and needs of the customer, the beneficiary, the citizen, and sustaining the quality over time to create a general sense of high satisfaction within the community, the country, for better lives. Number 4, it is also important to note that 2 of the 8 pillars remain in yellow zone: investing in human and social development, and particularly the economic and corporate governance, which is a prerequisite for sustainable socio-economic development, and still on decreasing slope. Noting the decline in performance under this pillar, the report is challenging all of us to reflect on the consequences and find solutions for improvement. Recalling that NST1 targets the private sector as the engine for economic growth in our country, we are invited to move from the traditional scope of governance, which was focusing on public sector, to include and embrace the corporate world and the business forum. Number 5, the COVID-19 has impacted the results of the RGS. Indeed, for the first time, the pillar economic and corporate governance is the lowest performer due to the low performance on economic growth and export trades. This decline of performance, while challenges are persisting in the areas of macroeconomic as well as corporate governance, affect the whole pillar and therefore sustainable socio-economic development. Indeed, the impact of the global health and socio-economic crisis due to the pandemic has negatively impacting the sector. Of course, the last data released by NICER showing a clear improvement during Q2, where the real growth between Q2 2020 and Q2 2021 is 20.6%, is showing glimpse of recovery. Number 6, the private sector role is key, hence the need to rethink business growth and sustainability strategies, including entrepreneurship skills, particularly for the youth who constitute the majority of the population and beyond, in Rwanda and beyond. I recommend that the next RGS track progress on the extent to which the country, including the private sector, is leveraging the African continental free trade area, which will be boosting the regional integration and allowing for more opportunities for our country to grow its economy. It is also important to look at the major implication for Rwanda of this perspective, be it on the sector liberation, the competition, the policy, the intellectual property rights, and the free movement, as it was already said during the migration forum at Geneva, where the Rwanda featured as well as really pushing forward the aspect of migration. And of course, Rwanda can and should play a positive role in pushing wider African continental free trade area, because it was signed in our country. So it is important that we also carry on the torch and move forward the agenda for regional integration. An inclusive and long-term economic and corporate governance plan is therefore timely. The inclusion of the private sector in planning, strategizing, implementing the national development agenda is paramount. Number 7, the human and social capital development, which is also lagging. The main question remains, is the private sector with us as we plan, assess, implement, and evaluate? Or do we only consider them as service provider instead of sustainable development and key actor of economic and social transformation? I invite all of us to reflect on this question and to continue contributing appropriate, innovative solutions to help advance this pillar. In that pillar, a critical question that also I'm always thinking about. Yesterday, I was discussing that with the UNDP resident representative. Remained how Rwanda could nurture and retain and expand a highly qualified workforce that is also gender responsive to match the ambition of the profound transformation grounded on knowledge and services and private sector led. Therefore, the relevance of the recommendation to strengthen the education system and improve its quality. Highly skilled human capital will also support the public finance management and the efficiency of institutions, systems, and service delivery. Number 8, before I conclude, combining recommendation under Pillar 6. We noticed that there was really a strong improvement on inclusiveness and civil society and media participation. However, it is important to enhance the role and the partnership with non-state actors, especially the civil society organization, the private sector, academia, for them to play a significant, more important role in socio-economic transformation of citizens in our country. Looking at capacity building, looking at more fora of engagement, looking at more innovative financing tools, looking at more opportunities as explained for the African Continental Free Trade Area. As the NST1 calls for private sector-led economy, the state and private sector engagement needs tremendous improvement. Number 9, continuing the inclusiveness is also paramount by tackling inequalities and extreme poverty, 35.6% in the satisfaction. More inclusion of people with disability under social protection, 34.5%. As we are towards Glasgow for the Conference of Parties 26, we commend the government for its nationally determined contribution and the excellent results in green growth and resilient growth in environment in general. However, it is important to continue mainstreaming environment protection, implementation on environment and climate change indicators, 52%, implementation of environment and climate change indicators in local government performance, 28.6%. It is not an easy task, but it is important to continue building back better, greener, in a more inclusive manner for COVID-19. Let me conclude. In reference to what I have just said, I would like to invite the audience to reflect further about the correlation between service delivery, economic and corporate governance, human and social capital development, and devise together strategies for quality services in economic transformation and monitor foreign trade and industrialization, bringing in more innovative finance, increase corporate governance, look at macroeconomic indicators, enhance the quality and the quantity of education, improve social protection, and look at climate change and environmental resilience. All are listed in the recommendation. I only push a door which is already open. Beyond that, NST wants Rwanda to become a service-based economy Considering that we are far from in the implementation of the National Development Plan, let us review our strategies and policies with a sense of urgency to take action for quality services, improve economic and corporate governance, and develop the human capital. By doing so, we'll be setting the ground for us to leave a legacy of the world we want for the current and next generation. Good governance is not only the matter of the government, it is a matter of all stakeholders, citizens, civil society, private sector, academia, media, with the support of all development partners. It is also good for all of us. So let us build a stronger coalition so that we all improve the governance status to achieve the national development priority and the Agenda 2030 for the benefits of all the people, leaving no one behind. Let me share to end 2 quotes. What get measures get managed, as Peter Drucker said. And another one, what get measured get done, as Tom Peters said. So let us reflect on the outcome of this RGS 8th edition. Adjust our strategies, our management approach to meet the current needs, and let us meet next year to celebrate what was done and results achieved. The UN system in Rwanda, and UNDP in particular, remains committed to continue working with the government and development partners and other stakeholders in fostering democratic governance values, and in particular, in producing data on governance for informed and evidence-based making policies and strategies. On a personal note, I want to thank RGB for associating me throughout my presence here in Rwanda, because it might be the last RGS to which I will take part, because in October next year, I might be retiring and enjoying something in my country, which is not as beautiful as Rwanda, but is still beautiful. So let me just once again thank you for your kind attention. Turi kumwe, abishize hamwe nakibananira, umunsi mwiza, weekend ziza. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, UN Resident Coordinator, for the remarks, and we thank you so much for being part of this journey since the inception of RGS. You know, RGS is one of the tools that help us to check if what we are doing today is directing us to where we want to go to be tomorrow. So we don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. So thank you so much, RC, for the support and for being part of this journey throughout. We now come to that moment where each one of us is expected to participate. I would like to know if there is anyone with a comment, question, or something else to say about what we have seen shared by the different presenters. I see 3 people. Yes, PS.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Samuel Dusengyumva. I am the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Local Government. So I'm here to congratulate RGB for this very good job done. We are very proud of the activities that were undertaken to reach this level. of information, but also of findings. We are hereby committing to implement the findings and the recommendations. I have two comments. One, I saw a couple of areas that require a bit of enhancement. For example, the participation of women in the position of Vice Mayor's Economic Affairs. So I take this opportunity to call upon all of us. We are going for elections, local government elections. So please convey the message to the strong and capable women in the country that they are welcome to join the local government family. We have been working hard to attract women in those positions, but we are very happy of the progress made in other positions, including the executive secretaries at district level. But also in other levels, we really welcome women because they're competent, they're capable, and we have seen what we can do in this country. Second, I would like to talk about social protection. Yeah, we saw a couple of areas that require improvement, especially in the categorization of persons with disabilities. We are aware of that. And part of the factors is the COVID-19, because this kind of categorization, they are done in public because it has to be transparent. But if you look at a number of indicators around social protection, I think it is linked with the COVID, but also some other areas of the economy. So I think now this report is going to help us to really sustain the conversation that we've been having with the relevant institutions, including Minister of Finance, but also with development partners. I'm sure Fode was part of the meeting where we discussed really about some of these issues. How can we mainstream this transformational program, especially those who go to the ordinary mwananchi, the citizens? So I think we can see some of these indicators going up by working together. And I'm very happy of this document and really hope it's going to help us have a frank but also evidence-based conversation on what we can do collectively to address some of these issues. Thank you very much. Congratulations once again, RGB.
Okay. Thank you very much, PS. I see Arthur, DG RBA.
Thank you very much. My name is Arthur Simu, and I'm the Director General of Rwanda Broadcasting Agency. I also want to render my voice in appreciating the good job or good work done by RGB in this scorecard. And mine is just a very simple question related to the period we're in of the COVID pandemic. And I was just surprised to see good performance in some governance pillars, yet in our day-to-day lives we would think maybe we have not scored well. I was intrigued when I saw the comparison between the 7th edition and 8th edition. You find that there's a great improvement in the pillar on participation and inclusiveness. This edition says there's a greater improvement, yet in actual sense, we think issues of elections, Umuganda, were affected by the pandemic. You look at issues on the pillar on human and social development, also scores relatively well compared to the previous edition. Quality of service delivery scores well. So I'm just trying to find out what's the magic, what happened to see these pillars score relatively well compared to the previous edition, yet in actual sense we thought this year we are so much affected by the pandemic and probably the results would be a little bit poorer than the previous edition. So what have we done as a government or as a society to see these key areas continue to show some progress despite the challenges posed by the pandemic? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Dr. Tombora.
Good morning to everybody. Professor Tombola. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the University of Kigali. I commend this Rwanda Governance Scorecard. I have one question and a recommendation. One question goes on page 11 of this report for the sake of the participants. It is on the same figure which attracts my colleague here, the DG or CEO of RBA. Pillar number 1 and pillar number 2 on these figures, they show a decrease. One may ask him or herself, what's the reasons? What are the reasons behind the decrease of the rule of law, the decrease on political rights and civil liabilities? This is my first question, the only question I have. The recommendation, it's on pillar number 8. The coordinator of one UN highlighted this pillar of economic and corporate governance. My proposal is that in the next edition, if on the indicators of corporate governance, we could include the ownership and control as an indicator of corporate governance, and if possible, the responsibilities of board of directors in private sector. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your question and recommendation. Your Excellency, High Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Good day to everyone. I would first like to express my gratitude for being invited to this 8th edition of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard. It is my first since I am new in Kigali, so thank you so much for the invitation. There are just 3 areas that attracted my interest from the presentation of Dr. Usta. The first one is the reflection of health as the most improved indicator in the human development area. And the reason this is attracting my interest is that we know that the COVID pandemic has required a lot of investment into the health area, but I think a lot of that investment has tended to be focused on dealing with and fighting the pandemic. And so I'm just interested whether this improvement of health in the human development area as the most improved is generalized, which would probably mean that Rwanda did more than just invest in equipment, services that are just focused on dealing with the COVID pandemic. So I'm just interested in that area. The second area of interest is that in a number of areas, you have indicated that a lot of the improvement that has been registered, whether transparency or service delivery, it's been through the use of information and communications technology. Now, my interest in this area is is the coverage, of information and communications technologies. Is this nationwide? Is it something that is more reflected in the urban areas? So I'm just interested on the extent and the coverage of information and communications technologies, especially when I note that the area of education you have reflected as an area that still needs a lot more improvement. The third and the last one is that the savings rate came up also as one of the most improved areas. And I just want to know here whether this is something that has to do with people spending less or just a conscious decision and choice by people to save more because of the COVID pandemic. So I'm just interested in that area. But otherwise, I'm very thankful, for the opportunity to witness this Rwanda Governance Scorecard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We would like to take one more comment or question, and then you have them responded to.
There are two there.
Chair Ningo.
Okay, I'm Pauline Okumu, Chair of Ningo, and I'm just really excited to what we've gone through today, and my congratulations on behalf of Ningo to the RGB and the government on this accountable. And I want to echo the message, the quotation around what is measured is done. Now, most of the people have actually mentioned around what is the key success factor, particularly on areas that have performed well, because as some of the partners are very key. Sorry. Some of the partners are very key in terms of made commitment on our contribution towards realizing the SDG. Now, if you wanted to do that, it would be very good to know exactly, specifically, what are the key success factors behind those areas that performed very well. Thank you.
I see one person. I think we'll take his comment or question and then respond to. Sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Begum Safari Honest. This morning, we are representing Chamber of Deputies. We are three here. I saw Honorable Bizimana Munani, Honorable Clarissa, who is representing FFRP. I wanted also to add my voice on congratulating RGB. You have come to this state of governance in Rwanda, which is a tremendous work. Actually, when we are through the period of COVID-19, so really we appreciate and congratulate you. In the Parliament, I work with the commission in charge of politics and gender. And we also promise our support, because normally the reports from RGB come to the Parliament, and this is the very commission which engages, which passes through the report with RGB. So we promise our support. But I have only just one simple question. Now, citizens countrywide have been actually under lockdown. And today, we have a good news that citizens are now, the situation is coming to normal. People are coming back to attend meetings. There's what they call inteko z'abaturage. They are now on. So now, regarding NST1, why we are still lagging behind? I mean, maybe if you can get time, you can just see how we are going to exploit this chance we are having in our country, where people really are coming back to normal life. Then another last one, I saw this parliament, I saw, though it is still a distinction with the parliament, I saw 89, regarding the score, I saw 89.79. Me, I saw this parliament when during the current mandate, this parliament was open. They call it actually inclusive parliament. Maybe you may show what could be missing with this parliament so that areas for improvement. Maybe you can just help on that. Because I know in the report it may be there. We shall of course get time and peruse through. But maybe you can just come on this one again and tell us what is lacking in the parliament, then how can we improve? Still, it is a decision, but we can even aim higher. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Safari. I will now hand over to the CEO to respond to the questions and say something on the comments that have been raised.
Well, thank you very much, SG, and thank you very much for the comments and the appreciations. We appreciate and the commitments. I am going to ask my colleagues, Dr. Felicier, who heads the Department for Research, if he has any of the questions to take on. And if the Deputy CEO wishes to take a question, then I'll come to the other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CEO. I'd like to address one comment raised by Professor Tombola, Vice Chancellor of University of Kigali. I remember his intervention came last year, and he recommended again to see how we can, on a pillar of economic and corporate governance, how we can incorporate some variable related to management of private sector. Today, he specifically highlighted the issue related to board of directors in the private sector. And this is very critical. And I remember we discussed about it. And the challenge we faced by collecting data, exactly is how we can get data from some institution, specifically on issue related to management of board of directors. I agree with you. Next year, we try to see how we can continue gathering data related to this particular area, and we are eager also to get data from private sector in this area. And as you have observed in this report, we went through detail in terms of management, also incorporating issues related to gender equality in the private sector, specifically in the leadership aspect. And I'm happy that you again raise this issue, and we are happy to incorporate your comment. And I'd like to remind you that Professor Tombola, it's his area of specialization. Corporate governance area is his area of specialization. That is why I'm happy that we will work together with a private sector partner to see how we can address this issue. Another issue I'd like maybe to address in general, it's an issue related to, like chairperson of Ningo also highlighted, and in DG RBA, even Professor Tombola himself, area of improvement. What is the key success stories in terms of improvement, despite the period we are having, the time we are collecting data? Now, I'd like to remind you that some areas, in English we used to say that every cloud has silver lining. And somehow COVID have opening us eyes and to see how we can strategically address some issues without necessarily doing business as usual. That is why by providing service to the citizens, we use the other specific method, the approaches, as the CEO highlighted. ICT helped us see how we can reach citizens without necessarily physically meeting them. And another approach we used is how citizens were involved in service provision as partners. For example, in the health sector, during COVID pandemic, you saw how citizens contributed actively, specifically in the voluntarism system, whereby they were proactive in fighting with the pandemic, as proactive as a partner, not only as beneficiaries. That is why we observe such kind of improvement in some area, like service delivery, participation, and inclusiveness. Those are some few issues I remember can contribute in the improvement of some pillars. Maybe Dr. Emmanuel can also supplement me in some area related to this particular question raised by our partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO. I just want to take to answer some few questions, starting with the question raised by Arthur. He was asking what can explain the improvement despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And before I go to details, I think it's all known that the effectiveness of the government, any government, is manifested during trying times, like the pandemic. If you need to measure governance effectiveness, you don't really need to measure during the, the honeymoon, peaceful time. How the government of Rwanda responded to COVID-19, it's in itself a governance performance that needs to be lauded. And that's why the point of departure, as I said in my initial remarks, is how the central role of the citizen, the government, and our partners in this whole process during the pandemic played out, to the current status we are having today. But if you go into the details of the report, particularly on page 31, you will see the details of what we measure, the indicators that we do measure. On page 31, he was talking about citizen participation and inclusiveness. And despite the pandemic, if you look at those indicators and the variables that we measure, for instance, like women participation, women in ministerial positions, civil society, state civil society relations, all of those issues, all of those aspects remained intact during the COVID-19. Actually, in some instances, like women participation increased during the pandemic, which actually made the performance, of the indicator higher. And so I would invite everybody to look at those indicators, what we measure, to see some areas, highlighted in the yellow, in the amber, and then in the green, to see what made the score higher or lower. This also applies to Professor Tombora's question on why we have like a decrease and I should refer him to page 21 of the report, the rule of law. Besides the economic development sector, I think the justice sector also was the most affected sector during the pandemic because courts were not operational during the lockdowns. And if you look at those indicators, what we measure, you'll find that there is a one in amber, 40% against the target, the backlog of the cases in the courts. And those backlogs actually made it, very difficult for the whole pillar to perform better. The decrease, so the backlog, it is in line with the performance of the judiciary. But if you look at the whole indicators, we also see a decrease in journalist perception of how they access the information. If you look at page 25 and 26, and then, because as we said earlier, we use different reports and different indices when we compare this RGS. So we have what we call Rwanda, the Civil Society Development Barometer, and the Rwanda Media Barometer. And those barometers, one measures the status of civil society development in Rwanda and their contribution to policy formulation. Another one, the role of media and their development, the status of their development. And in those reports, there's some area that need to be improved. And we take those reports very seriously. That's why the indicators have performed very poor in this report and affecting the whole performance of the pillar. And I think other questions can be answered by the CEO. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will go back to the questions that that my colleagues did not mostly engage with. Arthur asks what we are doing right in all the fact that we have increased, some of the indicators have performed much better than we have, much better than we had last year, given this, the pandemic. I think I should say that the challenges that the pandemic presented also must be reflected from a governance system that existed prior to the pandemic. So when you're looking at the governance methods and approaches and the character of how to deal with the pandemic, I think the pandemic gave an opportunity for the citizens, especially on the things we ask citizens, to reflect actually. I'll just give an example of the participation and inclusiveness. I earlier mentioned that the participation and inclusiveness pillar raised its performance, especially with the opportunity of using our volunteers. When you ask the citizens, first of all, they feel like they didn't sit back to watch the pandemic coming. They were given information and they were given strategies on how to deal with the pandemic. The inclusive element of dealing with the pandemic through having youth volunteers that were educating the population, but also through progressively communicating to the population on what is next, the preparedness. We all remember when we had the COVID-19 and started to prepare earlier, a little bit earlier than March, remember the faith-based organizations reintroducing how do you give one another peace. So they stopped doing the peace with handshaking and started using their legs in a way. So that inclusiveness at the beginning, getting the information from the beginning, made the Rwandan citizens not just consumers of the information that is there, but we are given enough space to participate. Now, I've seen my colleagues who are from other countries, they probably know umuyobozi w'umudugudu more than they had before. You know, I've engaged with friends and they say, oh, do you know now that I know my umudugudu leader more than I did? Why? Because as we were mobilizing ourselves in communities to deal with the cases of COVID that were coming in our communities, but also to ensure that those affected by the lockdowns do not remain poorer or do not fail to survive, the inclusiveness and the participation aspect seems to have been a highlight for the citizens to see it as a greater space for participation and inclusiveness in reality. Now, coming close to when we had the vaccines, the way vaccinations happened, you know, knowing the people that get the vaccine, mobilizing those that get vaccinated. I know a few colleagues of ours, we could call them and say, you're going to be vaccinated. And I remember this very specific conversation with a colleague who leads an international organization. I called them because the RGB was in that participatory approach. I think going back to the question by Ningo, how do you participate in anything that happens that concerns the life of the country? And in that participatory approach, the RGB were asked to contact the faith-based sector, the NGOs, and the CSOs to access vaccinations. And I remember these conversations with some of my colleagues from other countries saying, oh no, the vaccinations are for Rwandans. And we said, but you're serving Rwandans. If you are going to be safe, we are either safe together or not safe at all. And that discussion also included, really, when you go back into the reflections, I think if we ask people to reflect on that process as well, which dominated our lives in the past year, it reflects the governance environment. And the fact that I think participation is not just going to Muganda, but not feeling left out in the whole process, despite the circumstance. You know, the greater circumstance this year was COVID-19. But in dealing with COVID-19, in accessing safety mechanisms, in the issues that affect those who were affected the most, in accessing testing, you know, all of those processes seemed very inclusive in the eyes of the people that we asked and in the ways that we engage with them in terms of engagement and participation. The question on human and social development, I think I will combine it with a response on the health sector. The health sector, as I think my colleagues mentioned earlier, we assess the governance status on the basis of existing commitments. So we already know what exists in the areas of health and what we want to measure as achievements as a country. So we did not reflect ourselves strictly on COVID-19, but on the other things that we were required to do in this health sector, because otherwise the country did not stop everything else to just face the COVID-19. We did address the COVID-19, but we sustained wherever possible the investments in other areas to not lose the track of the commitments that we have as a country vis-a-vis the vision of the country, but also the national strategy for transformation. So when you look at the things we measure in the health sector genuinely, you realize that we measure greater things than just the response to the COVID-19. And the COVID-19 is in one of the variables where we measure the strengthening of the health systems as an indicator. And in that, we look at the existing health systems, the access points of health systems, and the extent that we've gone to. But also we measure infant mortality rate, and that has seen greater improvement. We measure access to family planning, which has greatly improved in many ways. So the things that we measure reflect the kind of health population we want to create, whether with or without COVID. With COVID, I think we haven't measured specifically in this RGS just on the focus of COVID-19, but the testing of the systems, of the health systems that we have as a country remained a key element, and whether the health systems were responsive. And I think at that, we need to be able to appreciate that in the shortest time the country was able, of course, in relationship with its partners, we are able to adjust and create facilities that would allow us to survive over the COVID-19 periods. The inclusive element, you realize that even in these centers that take care of COVID patients, there are specific places for women, for pregnant women specifically. So when you see the increase in relation to maternity, infant mortality rates, you also realize that the inclusive element was also considered in that particular perspective. So generally, as I mentioned, I was answering the elements of why have we done better in some of these areas. I combined the human and social development aspect. You would know that even when we didn't perform very well in the education sector, it is the time that we constructed so many schools to allow more space in the education systems. And when you go to the citizens, they will recognize that even though we had school closed in many times, we know for sure that access is extended. We have more schools we have more classrooms in schools constructed, and that improves the environment other than it was. On the issue of quality of service delivery, I think we highlighted the role of the ICT. For many, there are so many people who are able to use the ICT for service delivery more than they used to do, because at least we were able to have, there are certain words that didn't exist before. You know, my daughters speak about a lot, home delivery of food and all of those things. Those are things that we were not used to prior because we were very physical in our engagements. But when COVID-19 came, we were able to use the opportunities of online and the facilities of ICT in order to be able to engage and get the kind of services that we need. So the role of service delivery remained central, but also the adjustments that the private sector did in terms of service delivery. Of course, they wouldn't do services as usual. So adjusting on how they deliver and how they engage was a key element that was recognized in this RGS 2021. So generally, I should say that the governance environment, access to information, and people being aware of how to adjust and being informed on how to adjust is probably a very foundational element of why we did better. You know, I think people don't appreciate just the service, they appreciate the entire environment through which they feel, if they feel that they are going to be able to survive, and the survival is friendly in a way, it did have a greater impact in that regard. So I think reflecting on the health system, High Commissioner, it's really that bigger environment beyond the COVID-19. We look at the COVID-19 mostly from the responsive perspective and the strengthening of the health systems as they are and as they exist, but also we measure the greater things that we already have as commitments in the country. But yes, also when you deal with having the equipment to respond to COVID-19, dealing with the pandemic, and now access to vaccination has been a very key element for people to have the confidence in the health sector, despite the struggles that the sector has gone through. I think the COVID-19 has seriously challenged our sectors, but some of the things that we celebrate in this process include the role of certain things that we have had before, the role of community health workers. When we went to home-based care, then we tested the role of our community health workers as part and parcel of the health strengthening system. So the existence of those structures also a great opportunity. On the issue of saving rate increasing, I think even prior to COVID-19, we have had initiatives that promote savings to the people. Ihagaze is a particular initiative that has been created, and that initiative actually encourages ordinary citizens, especially those in the first category of the first category. If you save, you are given an additional saving. So you save, and they give you half of the saving also as a contribution to your savings. So the measures that the government has put in place to encourage saving and to build systems through which people can save is actually the environment. Despite that the economy has been hit, the number or the amount of saving is not what has been key, but the fact that more people are now motivated and encouraged to save. And one of the consequences of the pandemic, if you followed the engagement, was that people realized that you cannot survive on a day-to-day basis only. So even those that were not initially involved in savings, they got motivated to start savings because they realized that at some point you need to survive on your savings other than what you earn on an everyday basis. So some also of the lessons of the pandemic was to encourage people to save, because with saving you are able to face the future that you don't know exactly as it looks. So I think that environment itself, having systems that facilitate saving, the saving culture, and also the people being able to reflect on the consequences of not saving, and being able to access savings that are also motivated by the whole status quo has allowed and permitted an increase in saving. My sister from the World Vision and chair of the Network for International Organizations in Rwanda is what are the key success partners in this area. I think when I responded, some of the success partners in Rwanda exist in the leadership intention of creating a resilient population. When you have an intention of creating a resilient population, you also give them the space to participate. So I would say that participation is at the center. Engagement with the citizens is a very key element in the success factors. But I should mention that the leadership of the defense forces and the security forces that has sustained itself is also a matter of understanding the forecast of the country, but as well as the discipline that is required. You know, I think governance is also seriously about discipline. People having the trust in the leadership, maybe I did not mention, but we also assess the trust in the leadership. And part of the results is the President of the Republic is way above 99%. The security forces are way above 95%, close to 99 in many areas. And then the fact that people trust the leadership also is a very fundamental element of the success factors that we see. But also, as earlier mentioned, accountability and transparency underpin the journey. Because if everyone who is delivering feels accountable, you know, when I do this report every year and I have the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies present, I am being held accountable here. I know they will hold me accountable even after here, but that kind of accountability, the feeling that you have to feel and enjoy the accountability, is a key element of the governance of this country. And the elements of transparency, as earlier mentioned. So, and of course, very intentionally, partnership. You know, the choice of doing this together. Delivering on the development of this country is a joint project. And the only way we do it is the beauty of this room. We are all here because we are partners in delivering. When you read through the NST, the question is, who will participate in delivering on this NST? And the answer starts. It's government institutions, it's individual citizens, it's development partners, it is members of the civil society, it is members of the faith sector, it's members of the private sector, it is the media. So that is also an underpinning. If you asked everyone in this room, they are thinking about a citizen to make an impact on. And if we are thinking about a citizen to make an impact on, we have a very strong common factor, all of us. Despite the things we do differently, we all have a very clear common factor, which is making a difference in a citizen's life. And I think that's also a very strong underpinning of the process and a factor that makes us deliver right. On the question of what the Parliament, by Honorable Begumisa, on what the Parliament is not doing, I should mention that when you read through the report, you will see there are two major things that are not, or three major things that affect this particular indicator. One, of course, is the Parliament has been doing a lot of citizen engagement prior, and it's part of your commitments to do citizen engagement. The COVID-19, with all the lockdowns and the inaccess and the staying in one district, limited that. There were very limited citizen engagement directly within the ordinary ways of doing it, and that affected the performance of Parliament specifically. And of course, the other element was the number of field visits that the Parliament had planned that were never delivered on in the specific way. Another element that leads to the underperforming of this particular pillar was the satisfaction with the maison de l'accès de la justice. These are people who help ordinary citizens who want to go to court for access to justice. Now, if you know the lockdowns and all the process and the impact that it has had on the operation of the justice system, you realize that people were not able to access these kind of access to justice forums that help them actually to do the cases that they were intended and supposed to do. So I think generally those are the questions. I am not sure. The question on ICT coverage that was raised, I think with the data, but part of what we do with this governance scorecard is ask the extent of internet penetration and the extent of mobile phone penetration. I am not sure the extent that we are at, but one is where I think above 80% in terms of connectivity, national connectivity, and the other is around the 70s, I think. I will verify the numbers, but it's part of the numbers that we use. So I would say that across the country there is, you can access the internet. The extent of how much the internet is fast or not is something to discuss. The thing we realize that the challenge is really the literacy rate of the citizens to use it. And for that, we so far have agents that facilitate the enjoyment of the online services that the country has invested in. So the extent of penetration is quite high in terms of ICT in the country, although I think there is quite more that can be done in terms of access and quality of the ICT that there is. I think those were the major questions. If I missed out anything, I could be reminded, but I and my colleagues were trying to really respond to the questions as raised.
Thank you very much, CEO. Thank you, colleagues, for your contributions. We now end the session of questions and comments here because we are running short of time based on our program. I would like, before we go to the last two items on the agenda, I would like us to we would like to take you through the how you can access the Rwanda Governance Scorecard online. If our IT team is ready, I would request them to show us how those who want to access it online can access it.
Well, I think that's what they are doing. You go to the RGB website, go to the publications, an element of publications, and under publication you find the Rwanda Governance Scorecard. And I think with that, if the SG permits, we launch the Rwanda Governance Scorecard 28th edition for your consumption. You have the copies on the table, but also you can access the copies online. And we really look forward to seeing your comments and your engagements on the Rwanda Governance Scorecard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, CEO. Thank you very much, all the participants. We highly value your contribution, your participation, not only in this room, but also in the process of producing this research product. We'll continue working with you to ensure that what we see still falling short is brought to the required level. So in the next couple of minutes, we'll have a group photo, and I will mention the people who will be in the group photo. We'll have the CEO of Rwanda Governance Board. We have one UN resident coordinator. We have the chief ombudsman. We have the chairperson of RIAF. We have the Israel ambassador. We have the High Commission of the Republic of South Africa. We have Deputy CEO. We have the chairperson of NINGO, the chairperson of Civil Society Platform, Honorable Hadija, the vice chair of Political Commission in the Senate of Rwanda. We have DVC, UR. We have DSG, RIB. We have DIGP. We have the representative of RDF. We have PS Minalok. We have the chair of NFPO. And we have the deputy RR UNDP. Can we come forward for the photo? Dr. Felicia. After the group photo, we will go for lunch, and the lunch will be taken at the tent somewhere. The protocol team will direct us where we'll have our lunch. Thank you very much once again. We highly appreciate your presence. I think for the sake of social distancing, we'll have some of us here up. I think some of us can stand here behind.
Lightning.